Once upon a time, there was a man and a woman who desperately wished for a child. They had to wait many years, and on one happy day, the woman found out that she was indeed pregnant with her first child. At the back of their little stone house was a small window from which they could see a gorgeous garden full of the most beautiful flowers and herbs. The garden was surrounded by a very high stone wall, and no one in the village dared to go into it because it belonged to an enchantress who had great power, and everyone in the kingdom was afraid of her. One sunny day, the pregnant woman was standing by this window, looking down into the garden and enjoying the beautiful flowers and herbs, as she saw a flower bed planted with a just very unique plant, a kind of rampion called Rapunzel. It looked so fresh, luscious and green that she desperately wanted to eat some. This desire and wish grew and grew with every day, and the woman herself became weak and began to look pale and miserable. One evening, the woman said to her husband, "Oh, if I can't eat some of the Rapunzel growing in the garden behind our house, I think I will die." The man loved her very much, and he decided that he must bring her some of the Rapunzel, no matter what the consequences will be. So at twilight, he climbed over the high wall into the garden of the enchantress. Quickly, he picked a handful of Rapunzel and brought it to his wife. Straight away, she made a salad from it and ate it greedily. It tasted so delicious that the next day she longed for even more Rapunzel than the day before. She had to have more. And in the gloom of the evening, her husband, who thought he had no other choice, let himself down again into the garden of the enchantress. But as he was turning away from the wall, there stood a very angry enchantress in front of him. She said, "How dare you climb into my garden and steal my Rapunzel? You shall suffer for this!" "Please," he answered, terribly afraid, "be merciful. My wife saw your Rapunzel from the window and felt such a longing for it that she would have died if she had not got some to eat." Then the enchantress allowed her anger to soften, and she said to him, "I will let you take the Rapunzel, but I make one condition, because everything has its price. You and your wife must give me your child when it is born. It shall be well treated. I will take care of it like a mother would." In his terror, the man agreed to everything. When the baby was born, a couple months later, the enchantress appeared at once. She gave the child the name of Rapunzel and took her away. Rapunzel grew into the most beautiful girl under the sun. When she was 12 years old, the enchantress shut her up in a tower deep, deep in the Black Forest. It had no door and no stairs. Right at the top was a small little window, So when the enchantress wanted to get in, she stood below the window and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel had magnificent, long, long hair, fine as spun gold. When she heard the voice of the enchantress, she unwound her braids and looped her hair over a hook above the window. It hung all the way to the ground, and the enchantress just had to climb up. 4 years had passed since Rapunzel had lived in the tower. And then, on one sunny day, the king's son happened to ride close by through the forest. He had heard a song that was so charming and captivating that he had to stop to listen. It was Rapunzel passing the time that she was alone by letting her sweet voice sing out. The king's son looked for a door to the tower, but he couldn't find one. The singing touched his heart, and he stayed to listen. From behind a tree, he saw the enchantress arrive and cry, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel let down the braids of hair, and the enchantress climbed up. "If that is the ladder, I too want to try," said the king's son. Next day, when it began to grow dark, he went to the tower and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Immediately, hair fell down, and the king's son climbed up. At first, Rapunzel was terribly frightened by a man she had never seen before stepping through her window. But the king's son spoke to her like a friend and told her that his heart had been stirred by her singing. Rapunzel lost her fear. She saw that he was young and handsome. When he asked if she would marry him, she said yes and laid her hand in his. "I want to go away with you, but I can't get down. Bring some silk thread every time you come, and I will weave a ladder with it. Then we will ride away together on your horse." They agreed that until that time he should come every evening, for the old enchantress always came in the day. The enchantress knew nothing of this until one day Rapunzel asked her, "Why is that you're so much heavier for me to pull up to the tower than the king's son?" "Ah, you wicked child!" cried the enchantress. "What do I hear you say? I thought I had separated you from all the world, and yet you have deceived me." In her anger, she clutched Rapunzel's beautiful braids, wrapped them twice around her left hand, seized a pair of scissors with the right, and snip, snip, she cut them off. Then she took poor Rapunzel into the desert and left her there, sad and miserable. The enchantress fastened the cut-off braids of hair to the hook over the window. When the king's son came and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair," she dropped them down the tower. The king's son climbed up, but instead of meeting with his dearest Rapunzel, he found the wicked and venomous enchantress. "Ha ha!" she cried mockingly. "You've come to fetch your dearest, but the beautiful bird no longer sits singing in the nest. The cat has got it, and will scratch out your eyes as well. You will never see Rapunzel again." The king's son was beside himself with sorrow. In his despair, he leaped down from the tower. He escaped with his life, but he fell into thorns which pierced his eyes. He wandered quite blind through the forest, eating nothing but roots and berries, weeping for the loss of his dearest Rapunzel. He traveled in misery like this for years, till finally he came to the desert where sad Rapunzel lived. He heard a voice, and it seemed so familiar to him that he went towards it. And Rapunzel recognized him and fell on his neck and wept. 2 of her tears wetted his eyes, and they grew clear again, and he could see once more. He led her to his kingdom, where he was joyfully received, and they lived for a very long time afterwards, happy as long as they lived.